Okay, joining me now is Katie Frost, a Republican strategist and former aide to the Ted Cruz for President campaign, and TarynRosenkranz, a Democratic strategist and CEO of New Blue Interactive. Great to see you both, ladies. Thanks for waking up early to be with us. Let me start with you, Katie, and these tariffs. Public reaction to this, I think, at this point, it's pretty well documented. Trump, for his part, seems undeterred. What do you hope he says at this announcement? I mean, how does he convince those who voted for him but are not happy about these tariffs to trust in his plan? What does he say?
He'll most likely talk about the long-term benefits and about reshoring American manufacturing to the United States. You know, I live in Georgia's 3rd Congressional District. That's my home. And we saw the impact of industry coming to our district, specifically the auto industry. Kia opened a major plant in LaGrange, Georgia, several years ago, and it completely revitalized that community. So I expect him to point to issues where foreign companies are investing in our country, where they're bringing manufacturing to the United States because they want to be exempt from a lot of these tariffs, and showing how it's going to benefit the American economy, because it's not just that one factory. Everyone involved in constructing it, everyone involved supporting the housing around it, anyone who's there to bring those jobs and to help the people who move to that community, it will have a huge impact on a lot of our communities. That is what I anticipate hearing him say. And also, you know, as Jeff said earlier in the opening package, this is a core part of his plan. And it may seem novel that there's someone who's actually keep doing what they said they were going to do when they get elected, but this is something he was elected to do. Now we get to see the results.
I think the issue is that it's broader than what he said he would do. And I think that's what's sort of spooking the markets. But Taryn, let me ask you, obviously, Democrats have very different motivations here. From your perspective, are tariffs the gift that just keep on giving for Democrats? And what do you hope he says?
Well, I certainly don't see anything that hurts the American people and the economy in the way that it is a gift by any means. But I do think this strategy is one where everyone is bracing for impact. And the impact might be exactly what Democrats are looking for in terms of a strategy of being able to get back into the White House, right? Like, this is the kind of thing where, you know, he won. Donald Trump claims that he won on this, you know, the economy, right? It was the economic issues. It was the cost of groceries. It was the cost of everything rising, inflation. And here we are about to potentially tip everything towards a recession. We're already talking about the cost of eggs and how high everything is. And now we're going to make it harder once again to get toilet paper, just like in his first term, for other reasons, but things that are happening at his own hand. And it's a risky plan for him, right? We're looking at this thinking, you know, economists, the markets, everything is thinking this is a really risky plan with a long-term benefit. And he doesn't have, you know, that much time. So I think, again, I would never call anything that hurts anything that way. And I'm concerned about what it's going to do for us. I think we're all bracing for that impact. But strategically, I'm not sure I would gamble this.
Yeah, Katie, I mean, obviously, there are still big questions about what this tariff announcement will entail, who will be impacted by how much. But based on what we know, how risky is this plan politically for Trump, and how much of a shadow does this cast? I mean, is it too soon to think about how this impacts midterms? How do you see it?
Well, we already had our first test in that recently, and I'm sure we'll just be discussing that later in the show with the races in Florida and Wisconsin. But, you know, as we said, I worked for Senator Ted Cruz when he ran for president. So I'll just say, underestimate Donald Trump at your own peril. I should know that better than anyone. So we will just have to see. There are a lot of things that he has done previously that people scoff at, or they think that it's going to have a disastrous impact. And then lo and behold, things settle down and ends up working out. So yes, there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment, but I do have confidence that President Trump and his team of advisors, they're definitely being deliberate about what they're doing. And, you know, it's not going to be boring. That's the one guarantee we always have in a Trump administration. So we're going to watch.
I think everyone can agree that it's never been boring. Certainly hasn't been this term. Katie, is it enough for the Democrats to run against something or against someone, whether it's the tariff policies, whether it's Elon Musk, whether it's Trump? Is that mobilizing enough in this environment, or do the Dems need an issue of their own to energize voters to get to the polls?
They really do need something they're running for, not what they're running against. And yes, President Trump was reelected on the economy, but there were a lot of other issues that played into it, specifically immigration. And look at what we've seen. The border down in the South is essentially closed. And the line President Trump used from his joint address was so good. We didn't need to pass a new law. We just needed a new president. We've gone from 11,000 crossings to single digits. How is that even possible? Because we have a new president. So he can point to successes like that. And the Democratic Party, they don't have anything to point to yet. They seem to be, and I say this with respect to my colleague, they seem to be struggling to find their footing. They don't know how to respond to this second Trump administration. They're looking for an issue. Will this be it? I personally do not see that happening. They need a good message and they need a good messenger. Right now, they have neither one.
Taryn, your response.
Well, I think it's unfortunate. I think the reason they don't know how to respond is because he is no longer following the Constitution. And that is scary to so many people. And I think it's hard to know how to respond when you've got someone who's circumventing the law of this country. And I think, one of the things that I think is also hard for us as Americans, and I say this as an American, is that is something that is the core value of being an American. This is what our founders believed in. This is what we have always believed in and known to be true. And when you circumvent that, it's hard. And it's also hard because facts, statistics, things that are coming out that are not true. We look at these Doge, the wall of receipts, that was a lie. I mean, there are so many things that are just not truthful that it's really, really hard to believe or look at a success and say, oh, yes, that really happened, because many times they're false. And so that also makes it hard. And it is hard to respond to constant chaos, lies, and mistruths and things thrown at you, especially when someone's trying to circumvent the law. So this traveling circus that we're all trying to deal with, and, Doge, which doesn't seem to have a plan, but has a plan, but I guess it's a secret master plan that none of us are in on yet. That's not a good thing. I don't want to be in on the secret master plan here. We want this to be a place that's safe for Americans, and that is somewhere that we can all thrive. That was the American dream, and that's what the Constitution is built on.
Okay, let's leave it here. Katie Frost, TarynRosenkranz, thank you both, but stick around. We're going to come back to you really shortly. Thank you. All right, and back with us now, Katie Frost, a Republican strategist and former aide to the Ted Cruz for President campaign, and TarynRosenkranz, a Democratic strategist and CEO of New Blue Interactive. Great to have you both again. Taryn, let me start with you this time. This Wisconsin race, your top-line reactions to it, and what does it mean for Democrats moving forward?
Well, it's a good sign, I think, obviously, on both of these races for where we want to be for all of this victorious election night here for her. I definitely think Wisconsin has deep red roots, and it certainly can show them. It's not as blue as we like to paint it, and it certainly is a state that likes to show that it can go back and forth. And I think this was one where we're seeing the palpable anger of people and that sort of pushback, particularly against Musk. This is where he came in and spent millions upon millions of dollars. I think it was that 20 million was the final, price tag there. And I think that was just not enough to overcome the fact that people really didn't want him in there. They didn't want that kind of message, and they were angry about what was happening with him and Trump's policies at the time. And so at the end of the day, I think this is going to be big news for everything that they're going to be able to do with redistricting and abortion and several of the other key issues that will come before the court.
Yeah, Katie, to Taryn's point, what's the message here for Republicans? Because despite Trump's support, despite Elon Musk's money and a lot of it, it wasn't enough to flip this seat. And Wisconsin, as Taryn points out, it's an interesting one because it can go either way. It's a swing state. What's the message last night for Republicans?
It's something that always amuses me when I step back from elections is we spend millions and millions of dollars and then nothing changes that much, right? Republicans maintain control of their seats in Florida. Democrats maintain control of the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. So to me, what I look at is what was motivating folks? Why did they turn out? And it was interesting. It's actually a split result in Wisconsin. Yes, they did win the Supreme Court seat, maintaining control there. But the Republican-backed ballot initiative to add photo ID also passed overwhelmingly by a wider margin than in the judicial race. So the issues that Republicans are usually talking about do resonate. It just so happened in this case, the candidate ended up working out better for the Democratic Party. But, this does also bring back memories of what we saw 8 years ago, especially when it comes to those House races. In my home state of Georgia, we had an open House seat. right there at the early part of 2017, and it ended up being the most expensive race for Congress up to that point in history. $50 million was spent. The Democrats wanted to flip a red district blue, and ultimately they fell short. So this is what we see. There's a lot of great opportunities to fundraise off of help me flip a district, but it didn't work out this time. So it's always interesting to see these. Both parties are looking for an early report card. They're looking for talking points. They want momentum. And right now, I see it a split, but things are looking good for President Trump in the midterms.
Yeah, I think one interesting thing to watch is Elon Musk the best messenger of some of these issues that have mobilized voters? Taryn, let me ask you the same question, but about Florida and these congressional elections there. Despite a lot of fundraising there, Dems weren't able to pull it off. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, it was the rubiest red of districts there. And I think everyone can say that. I mean, both of the folks in November was 67%, 65%. Those aren't districts that you go to fight, right? So it is a big fundraising opportunity for folks right after a big election, an electoral loss, to say, hey, let's go get them. This is our first opportunity to fight. But those aren't opportunities where you really realistically can win. So it's an embarrassment that margin shrunk so much. So Trump should be looking at this and saying, uh-oh, I've got some problems here, that I shaved off that many people of my core rubiest red of districts. This is not good. So while they, helped themselves by having those districts, it is a little bit concerning to them. And I think you said something really interesting, Katie, when you said, yeah, they spent all that money and they lost that seat in 2017. And ultimately, Trump did lose the White House in 2020. So maybe this is an early indicator on both fronts that there is a lot of enthusiasm, and you are shaving off these margins. We are seeing victory in Wisconsin when it is a state that goes back and forth. And so, sentiment, it's early, but sentiment is certainly not in the right direction. And this early in the honeymoon phase of Trump, you shouldn't really be having these kinds of results.
Yeah, I mean, Katie, to Taryn's point, I mean, these are ruby red districts. Fine himself admitted that there is a lot of Democratic rage, I think is the word he used, or anger, and it's mobilizing. And so I wonder, to Taryn's point, I mean, how much of an uh-oh is this for the White House? Is a win, or are they looking at the margins thinking, oh, okay, we need to change something before 2026? How do you see it?
I see it as a win is a win, but there is something for my Republican colleagues. We need to make sure we mobilize our voters and turn them out when President Trump is not leading the ticket. That's going to be the key for 2026 for us. But, it's very easy to be motivated when you've just lost, as Taryn was saying earlier. This is the first opportunity to fight back, and that's why you see so much turnout and enthusiasm, usually in the opposition party. However, what I tend up seeing, you talk about Wisconsin being a state that can go back and forth. Back in the day, Florida was a state that went back and forth. I mean, we all remember 2000 and how long that process was dragged out. It was a swing state, but after strong Republican leadership, it showed the results, and now it's a solid red state. So give time for Republican policies to take effect. People live under them. They actually tend to turn out pretty good. So I think we're going to see some interesting things happening in Wisconsin, but I'm looking forward to 2026, and it gives us something to talk about, right? We have plenty to talk about between now and November of 26.
Fair enough. And in fact, I think I'll be talking to you in the next hour. So appreciate you being with us this hour. I will see you again soon. That's Katie Frost and TarynRosenkranz. Thank you both, ladies. See you soon.
Thank you.
Welcome back. And there were key wins for both Republicans and Democrats in the first major state races of President Trump's second term in Wisconsin. CNN projects that the Democratic-backed candidate Susan Crawford will win the state Supreme Court race there, maintaining the liberal majority on the court. And in Florida, CNN projecting that Republican Jimmy Patronis will win the state's first congressional district, filling the House seat vacated by Matt Gaetz. And Randy Fine is projected to win in Florida's 6th district, filling the seat left by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Both wins giving Republicans a slight boost to their narrow House majority. Joining me now to discuss is Katie Frost, a Republican strategist and former aide to the Ted Cruz for President campaign, and TarynRosenkranz, a Democratic strategist and CEO of New Blue Interactive. Great to see you again, ladies. Appreciate you sticking around to be with us this hour. Taryn, let me start with you. All of that money spent in races that really just ended in the status quo in Wisconsin and Florida, both keeping the seats, that they had been running for that had existed. What's your big takeaway, and where do you see momentum building for Democrats?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think let's start with Wisconsin. So in Wisconsin, we had just seen in the presidential that it had been flipped. So this for us, if you look at it, was important to see that it went back. And so I don't think that was the status quo there. We wanted to make sure that, voters were mobilized. I think that it was important to see that it was a rejection of Musk and his money coming in. There was $20 million spent, as you said. There's lots and lots of money coming in and outsiders coming in, and there was a rejection of that, which I think really goes to show that while Wisconsin can go back and forth and has become quite the battleground state, we did see voters going back to their roots there and keeping that status quo for the court. And I think, in Florida, they may have done the same thing, but in that ruby red district, we really shaved off quite a significant amount of voters with them. I think they outperformed, Democrats outperformed, over 10 percentage points from what happened in November. And I think that kind of movement is significant. While it didn't result in a win, you wouldn't really expect to in a ruby red district like that. They definitely made strides that I think really speak volumes.
Katie, what about you? I mean, the GOP retains those open seats in Florida, helps build its slim majority in the House. But despite Trump's support, despite Elon Musk's money, it wasn't enough, at least in Wisconsin, to flip the Wisconsin Supreme Court seat. What's the message you're taking away from last night for Republicans moving forward?
We had some good wins in Florida, and we also had a significant win in Wisconsin. Everyone's focusing on this judicial race, but we also had the ballot initiative on voter ID. Republicans strongly backed that, and that had the widest margin of anything that was on the ballot in Wisconsin. So a Republican issue did incredibly well. The Republican-backed candidate didn't fare as well, but you know what? I've worked judicial races before. Getting folks interested in those, it feels like pulling teeth sometimes. It's very difficult to get people to turn out for a judicial race. But I do remember something that former RNC Chair Reince Priebus said many years ago. He said, Republicans focus on personalities and Democrats focus on process. The Democrats are very focused on the process of knowing these things are going to go through the courts in Wisconsin, and that's why they made that race such a priority. So we joked about earlier, the more things happen, the more they stay the same. Not really a huge change anyway in either of these races, but I know the Democrats, they're going to talk about, oh, look, we gained some percentage points in these Republican districts. Yes, they did, but that's because we're looking for a silver lining here for the Democratic Party after a very bad November election cycle. So I think the Republicans are in a good position for sure, and I'm looking forward to what's going to happen for the next year and a half.
Yeah, I mean, Taryn, do you think it's a fair point to say we might be making too much of these results, or at least Wisconsin, and that, I mean, special elections in general, the turnout that you see there aren't necessarily the most reflective of what you might see in a presidential race, and maybe not even the most reflective of what you might see in a midterm?
Yeah, I think that is certainly a fair point and something we should look at. I think probably what would be more of a bellwether are sort of these town halls that we're seeing where people are yelling at their members of Congress about, we're having veterans who are so upset over all of these cuts and what's happening to them. And I think that's where we're seeing that sentiment. I think the word we used earlier in the show was rage, right? There's just a lot of anger and upset, and there's feelings from, I think, people of both parties who are feeling like, I'm just being hurt by these policies. This is a lot of chaos. And I think we're seeing that momentum of that. And that's why you're shaving off some of these voters in a ruby red district. So that's what I would be more concerned about, whether it's percentage points or mobilization or money or any of those things. Those are tactics and those are politics at its best. But I think what I would be more concerned about as a Republican strategist, if I was in those shoes, would be sort of this feeling and overall sentiment that seems to be changing, where folks are like, I did vote about the economy and you are not helping. If I'm looking at the cost of groceries, instead of them going down, I'm worried they're going up. And that's not the direction I voted for.
Yeah, I mean, perfect segue, Katie. I mean, in the last hour, you said that, this announcement from President Trump at 4 p.m. on these tariffs, that you expect him to talk about the long-term benefits of this policy. But how risky is that when the big concern for most Americans, fresh off an election, is still prices on an issue that he ran on?
Well, this is the time when you swing for the fences, right? You're early in your second term. His popularity is higher than it's ever been. And also, Rasmussen is showing for the first time in over 20 years, more Americans believe we're heading in the right direction than the wrong direction. That's huge. So this is the time for President Trump to really go for those issues that he ran on. And like I said, this is when he is going to swing for the fences. I think we're going to see a good midterm for the Republicans. Obviously, we've got a long way to go. But I do believe things are going well for them because, yes, we see those town halls. But listen, give me a couple $1,000s in a bus, and I can show you a lot of people at a town hall too who are very upset. It's not the hardest thing to AstroTurf, and we've seen that done time and time again. What I would be concerned about if I was a Democrat is they appear to be a party without a clear message and without a clear messenger. And a lot of times we've talked about there's money in races. Yes, it's a tactic, but there was a huge fundraising advantage for the Democrats in Florida. They still lost. A lot of money was poured into Wisconsin, and the Republican-backed candidate lost. So will the money actually play out with this fundraising advantage that we always talk about? Who knows? But if I was a Democrat, I would be concerned about what is our message going into the midterms? How do we look at the American people and say, you may be frustrated with this, but we're better. What is the alternative? And who is the person to deliver that message? That's what I'm looking forward to seeing shape up over the next year and a half.
Taryn, your response to that, are the Democrats even now still a party without a message? Is it enough to run on being anti-Trump or anti-Elon Musk or anti-tariffs, or do they need an issue? And who is the right messenger? Who is the messenger for the party right now?
Well, I think the good news is that we don't have to have a clear messenger for the White House for 4 years from now. We don't have to have this clear front runner yet. And I think those who do stand for something and those who are running for something, and I do agree with you 100%. I think that the most successful candidates that we saw in 2024 were those who were running for something and not just an anti-Trump sentiment. And I believe, all the candidates that I work for, that is something that they've been talking about over and over again and who talked about and won on election night in November. So I feel very confident about the fact that many of our wonderful candidates across the country are running on messages of what they stand for, what they believe in, and making sure we're standing to our values, sticking to the Constitution, and making sure we're doing things that are going to help the American people, not hurt the American people. And I think that that's what they're focused on. Is there a clear leader? Is there going to be someone who's going to emerge? We have to see. But I do think that people were inspired yesterday by Cory Booker's filibuster in the Senate. I think, I'm not saying he's emerging as a leader, but I am saying that there are folks who are standing up, who are talking about what they believe in. I don't think that was an anti-Trump message. I think that that was something about what we believe in and what we need to do and speaking the testimony of the people. And I think it was really powerful. And I can't believe how many people came up who aren't interested in politics and were talking about it yesterday. So I think it's exciting to see. And I think you're going to see more people emerge like that who are coming out and speaking out and talking about what they believe.
Senator Cory Booker is an interesting one, especially since his name has sort of been out there and then the universe of possible contenders before. Watch this space. Katie Frost, Taryn Rosenkranz, great to see you both. Thank you.